travel journeying through the fourth dimension. Welcome, intrepid explorers of the impossible, to Zen Gaming Zone channel. In this podcast, we dare to venture beyond the boundaries of the present moment. I'm your host, Dev, and today, we're embarking on a journey that has captivated the human imagination for centuries. Time travel. Picture this: you're holding a remote control not for your television, but for the very fabric of time itself. With a simple press of a button, you could witness the building of the pyramids, have lunch with Leonardo da Vinci, or peek into the far future where humanity has spread across the stars. It sounds like the stuff of science fiction, doesn't it? But here's the kicker: many serious scientists believe that time travel might actually be possible. In the next hour, we'll dive deep into the theories, principles, and potential mechanisms of time travel. We'll grapple with mind-bending paradoxes that challenge our very understanding of cause and effect. And we'll explore the profound philosophical implications of a world where time is no longer a one-way street. So fasten your seatbelts, calibrate your flux capacitors, and prepare to have your minds blown. Whether you're a science enthusiast, a sci-fi aficionado, or simply curious about the nature of time itself, this episode promises to take you on a thrilling ride through the fourth dimension. Let's begin our journey through time. Before we dive into the specifics of time travel, we need to address a fundamental question. What exactly is time? It seems like a simple query, doesn't it? We all experience time, we all feel its passage. And yet, when we try to define it precisely, it becomes surprisingly elusive. Isaac Newton, the father of classical physics, viewed time as absolute, a universal clock ticking away at the same rate for everyone and everything in the universe. But in 1905, a patent clerk named Albert Einstein turned this notion on its head with his theory of special relativity. Einstein proposed that time is relative. It can speed up or slow down depending on how fast you're moving or how strong the gravitational field is around you. This isn't just theoretical, we've measured these effects. Atomic clocks on fast-moving planes run slightly slower than those on the ground. GPS satellites have to account for time dilation effects to function accurately. But Einstein's insights went even further. He proposed that space and time are fundamentally interlinked, forming a four-dimensional fabric called spacetime. This concept is crucial for understanding the possibility of time travel. Now, let's consider our everyday experience of time. We perceive time as flowing in one direction, from past to future. This is what physicists call the arrow of time. It's intimately connected with the concept of entropy, the tendency for systems to become more disordered over time. But here's where it gets interesting. The fundamental laws of physics don't actually distinguish between past and future. If you were to film a simple physical process like two billiard balls colliding, and then play the film backwards, it wouldn't violate any laws of physics. So why do we experience time as moving in one direction? This is one of the deepest mysteries in physics, and it's closely tied to the question of whether time travel is possible. If we could somehow reverse the arrow of time, or step outside of its flow, could we move freely through time as we move through space? With these fundamental concepts in mind, let's explore some of the theories and proposed mechanisms for time travel, starting with travel to the future. Believe it or not, we already know how to travel to the future. We're doing it right now, at the rate of 1 second per second. But what if we want to go faster? This is where Einstein's special relativity comes into play. According to this theory, as an object approaches the speed of light, time slows down for that object relative to a stationary observer. This effect is called time dilation. Imagine you have a twin sister. You board a spaceship that can travel at 99.5% the speed of light while she stays on Earth. You zoom around space for what seems to you like 1 year, then return to Earth. But when you land, you find that 10 years have passed for your sister and everyone else on Earth. Congratulations! You've just traveled 9 years into the future. This isn't just theoretical, we've observed time dilation effects with ultra-precise atomic clocks. The differences are tiny at the speeds we can currently achieve, but they're real. Another way to travel to the future involves gravity. Einstein's general relativity tells us that strong gravitational fields can also slow down time. The closer you get to a massive object like a black hole, the more time slows down for you relative to distant observers. So, if you could orbit very close to a black hole for what seems to you like a few years, you might return to find that centuries have passed on Earth. Of course, the practical challenges of such a journey are significant, to say the least. But what about traveling to the past? This is where things get really interesting and much more speculative. One idea comes from Einstein's equations in general relativity. In 1949, mathematician Kurt Gödel discovered that certain solutions to these equations describe universes in which closed time-like curves are possible. A closed time-like curve is essentially a world line that returns to its starting point in space and time. In other words, a path for traveling to your own past. The universes Gödel described don't match our observations of the actual universe, but they raised the tantalizing possibility that general relativity might allow for backwards time travel under certain conditions. Another theoretical possibility for traveling to the past involves wormholes, hypothetical tunnels through space-time that could connect distant points in space and time. If you could create a wormhole and somehow keep it stable, which would require exotic forms of matter with negative energy density, you might be able to use it as a shortcut not just through space but through time as well. It's important to note that all of these ideas for traveling to the past remain highly speculative. They often require conditions or forms of matter that we're not sure can exist in our universe. But they illustrate an important point. Within the mathematical framework of our best theories of physics, backwards time travel isn't obviously impossible. It's problematic and may turn out to be forbidden by some principle we haven't yet discovered, but it's not ruled out by the equations themselves. This opens up a Pandora's box of possibilities and paradoxes, which brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of time travel, the mind-bending logical conundrums it seems to create. Imagine you have a time machine. You step in, dial it back to 1920, and meet your grandmother when she was a young woman. But through a series of unfortunate events, you prevent your grandparents from meeting. What happens? This is the famous grandfather paradox, one of the most well-known logical problems with backwards time travel. If you prevent your grandparents from meeting, you would never be born. But if you were never born, how could you travel back in time to prevent their meeting in the first place? This paradox seems to create a logical impossibility, a breakdown in the basic principle of cause and effect. It's one of the strongest arguments against the possibility of backwards time travel. But creative thinkers have proposed several potential resolutions to this paradox. One idea is the Novikov self-consistency principle, proposed by physicist Igor Novikov. This principle suggests that any actions taken by a time traveler were always part of history. So if you went back in time, you'd find it impossible to change the past in any way that would create a paradox. The universe would conspire to prevent it, maintaining a single, self-consistent timeline. Another possibility is the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. In this view, when you travel to the past and change something, you're not changing your own past, but creating a new timeline, a parallel universe where events unfold differently. So you might prevent your grandparents from meeting in one timeline, but the you that made the time journey would still exist, originating from the original timeline. A third resolution, proposed by some philosophers, is that backwards time travel logically requires a universe with circular causality. In such a universe, effects can be their own causes. This sounds bizarre, but it's not necessarily logically contradictory, just very different from how we usually think about cause and effect. The grandfather paradox is just one of many time travel paradoxes that have been proposed. Another famous one is the bootstrap paradox, also known as an ontological paradox. Imagine a scenario where an aspiring composer receives a visit from his future self, who gives him the score to a brilliant symphony. The composer publishes this work, becomes famous, and eventually travels back in time to give the score to his younger self, completing the loop. But where did the symphony come from originally? It seems to exist without ever having been composed, bootstrapping itself into existence through the loop in time. This paradox doesn't create a logical impossibility like the grandfather paradox, but it does challenge our notions of creativity and origin. These paradoxes highlight the profound ways in which time travel, particularly to the past, could challenge our understanding of causality, free will, and the nature of reality itself. They force us to grapple with questions that go beyond physics and into the realm of philosophy. Speaking of which, let's take a moment to explore some of the philosophical implications of time travel. The possibility of time travel raises deep questions about the nature of time itself. Is the past fixed and unchangeable, or is it malleable? Is the future already determined, or is it open and influenced by our choices in the present? These questions touch on the age-old philosophical debate between determinism and free will. If we can travel to the past, does that mean all of history is set in stone, including our future actions? Or does our ability to potentially change the past imply that the future is not predetermined? The philosopher David Lewis proposed a view called modal realism, which suggests that all possible worlds are equally real. In this view, when we talk about what could have happened, we're referring to events that really did happen, just in a different possible world. This idea aligns interestingly with the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics and provides one way to think about the metaphysics of time travel. Another philosophical question raised by time travel is the nature of personal identity over time. If you could meet your younger self, would that person really be you? If you changed the past, would the future version of you that returns be the same person who left? These questions intersect with broader philosophical debates about what constitutes the self and how we persist as individuals through time. They challenge our intuitions about the continuity of personal identity and the relationship between our past, present, and future selves. Time travel also raises ethical questions. If we could travel in time, would we have an obligation to try to prevent past atrocities? Would it be ethical to use knowledge of the future for personal gain? How would the possibility of changing the past affect our concepts of moral responsibility? On a more positive note, the idea of time travel encourages us to think beyond our usual temporal perspective. It invites us to consider our place in the grand sweep of history and to contemplate the long-term consequences of our actions. Even if physical time travel remains impossible, the thought experiment of imagining ourselves in different historical periods or in the far future can broaden our moral and intellectual horizons. Now that we've explored the theories, paradoxes, and philosophical implications of time travel, let's turn our attention to some of the proposed mechanisms and technologies that might one day make it possible. One of the most famous proposed time machines comes from physicist Ronald Mallet. Inspired by Einstein's insight that gravity can affect time, Mallet has theorized that a circulating beam of light could create a twisting of space-time, potentially allowing for time travel. The idea is based on Einstein's prediction that a massive rotating cylinder could drag space-time around it, a phenomenon known as frame dragging. Mallet's insight was that light, which has energy and therefore mass equivalence, could potentially create a similar effect. While Mallet's ideas are grounded in established physics, many scientists are skeptical about whether the effect would be strong enough to allow for practical time travel. Nonetheless, his work illustrates how scientists are trying to leverage our understanding of general relativity to conceptualize potential time machines. Another approach involves the idea of cosmic strings, hypothetical defects in the fabric of spacetime left over from the early universe. Some physicists have proposed that if two such strings were to pass close to each other at high speeds, they could create closed time-like curves, potentially allowing for time travel. Then there's the possibility of using wormholes for time travel. As we mentioned earlier, wormholes are hypothetical tunnels through spacetime. If we could create a wormhole and keep one end of it moving at high speed relative to the other, the two ends would end up at different points in time. Theoretically, you could step through and emerge in the past or future. The challenge with wormholes, aside from the minor issue of creating them in the first place, is keeping them open. The natural tendency of a wormhole would be to collapse instantly. To keep it open would require some form of negative energy or negative mass, exotic forms of matter that we're not sure can exist in large quantities in our universe. Some more speculative ideas involve harnessing the properties of exotic matter or energy to create bubbles of space-time that could move backwards through time. One such concept is the Alcubierre drive, originally proposed as a way of achieving faster-than-light travel, but which some have suggested could potentially be used for time travel as well. It's important to note that all of these proposed mechanisms remain highly theoretical. They often require conditions or forms of matter that we've never observed and may not be possible in our universe. But they show how scientists are using the mathematical tools of general relativity and quantum mechanics to probe the limits of what might be possible. As we near the end of our journey through the twisted corridors of time, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned and where the field of time travel research might be headed. We've seen that while traveling to the future is not only possible but happening all around us due to relativistic effects, traveling to the past remains a far more challenging and speculative prospect. The theories that seem to allow for backwards time travel often require exotic conditions or forms of matter that we're not sure can exist in our universe. Moreover, the logical paradoxes associated with backwards time travel present significant conceptual hurdles. While various resolutions have been proposed, from self-consistency principles to parallel universes, we're still far from a consensus on how, or if these paradoxes could be resolved in a physically realizable way. But the very fact that serious scientists and philosophers continue to grapple with these questions is a testament to the profound importance of the concept of time travel. It's not just a fun trope for science fiction stories. It's a conceptual tool that allows us to probe the deepest mysteries of physics, causality, and the nature of time itself. Even if we never achieve physical time travel, the pursuit of it is pushing the boundaries of our understanding. It's forcing us to confront the limitations of our theories and inspiring new ways of thinking about space, time, and the fundamental nature of reality. Moreover, the philosophical implications of time travel extend far beyond physics. They touch on questions of free will, personal identity, ethical responsibility, and our place in the vast tapestry of history. Contemplating time travel can broaden our temporal and moral perspective, encouraging us to think beyond the confines of our present moment. As we look to the future, it's clear that the study of time travel will continue to be a rich and exciting field. Advances in our understanding of quantum mechanics, general relativity, and the nature of space-time may open up new avenues for research. Perhaps we'll discover new physics that definitively rules out backwards time travel, or perhaps we'll find a loophole in the laws of nature that makes it possible. Either way, the journey promises to be fascinating. And who knows, perhaps someday, a future episode of this podcast will be broadcast from a genuine time machine as we report live from the building of the pyramids or the far future of humanity. Until then, I encourage you to keep pondering. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please subscribe to my channel and like and share the video.